You know what, guys? Oh, there we go. Sorry about that, guys. Can you hear me now? Can everybody hear me now? I had my mic on mute and I didn't realize it. All right, guys, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for joining me. Sorry for that little technical glitch, but I am back from being banned. So I was banned for a little bit here on YouTube, not on Rokfin, never banned on Rokfin, have not been banned from Locals or from Vimeo yet, from any of these platforms. I don't anticipate that happening because I don't think that any of those other places are, going into the one narrative nation that seems to be what YouTube is doing. So I received a strike on the channel. Because I received a strike, I had already previously received a warning back in April. Because I had received a strike, YouTube had prevented me from posting, uploading, or live streaming for 1 week. That was the punishment. I actually ended up appealing that decision and I won that appeal. So they lifted the ban and I didn't have to go a week with being banned from even posting in the community. So, and the reason why they ended up lifting it, the reason why they ended up, and it was a short ban. I was banned yesterday. I was unable to do anything. And then I appealed it. And then early this morning or late in the middle of last night is when I received the notice that the ban had been lifted, that I had won the appeal, apparently. So the reason why they had banned me was for medical misinformation. I don't know if this is a surprise to anybody that you have to go along with whatever it is that is the thing that Fauci is saying that day, whatever the thing is that Fauci is saying. Even if Fauci says something different from one day to the next, you have to go along with what he says, what the CDC says, and what the WHO say. And if you go against any of that at any point in time, then you are spreading medical misinformation. So over the course of this, I had received a warning previously and a video had been removed. That was last year when I talked about the virus coming from a lab. And that was considered medical misinformation a year ago, if we can all remember that. Now it's mainstream news. Now it's all over the news and they're really investigating whether or not it came from a lab. In April, I received another warning, and that warning was for talking about things I can't talk about. So otherwise I'm going to end up with another strike and another warning. So in April, I did another piece about some stuff relating to that topic, if you can imagine. Got a warning. They removed the video. That video was from a live stream. I had removed the live stream from public view in the studio side of my YouTube channel, which meant no one could watch it. Yet I ended up yesterday still receiving a strike. So they went from a warning to a strike, which meant they then banned me from doing anything, from uploading, streaming, posting in the community. They elevated me to having a strike. And when I reviewed what it was they were striking me over, it was for the same video that they had given me a warning for back in April. The same video they had removed and no one was able to watch it. So why would they give me a strike for a video that no one could watch? Because it was still in the studio side of my YouTube channel. It wasn't visible to the public. The live stream I had removed, they took the video clip down that was taken from the live stream. They removed that themselves. And then the live stream portion of it, I had taken out of public view. And they gave me a strike for that months later. Find that very odd. The timing's very odd. The timing, of course, comes a day after I released a video via my email newsletter that you can only get through my email newsletter or if you're on my locals community. And if you sign up for my email newsletter today, you actually will receive that video in your inbox right away. So if you go to KimIversonUncensored.com, sign up for my email newsletter, you will get that video that goes against community guidelines. And I know that there are some people on YouTube talking about, some people are saying, oh, you can talk about this Iverson drug. I'm just going to use some kind of try to keep up with me on what I'm trying to say to you because I have to use code language. But I did a piece, an extensive piece that was about 45 minutes long on something that sounds a lot like my last name. And that people said to me, no, Kim, people are talking about that on YouTube. You can talk about that. No, you cannot. It is in the community guidelines specifically, names it by name. You are not allowed to talk about the things that sound like my last name. And if you do, you potentially will have a strike against your channel. You will potentially be removed completely or demonetized. So people are risking it when they're talking about these types of things on the platform. They are risking in a month from now or a couple of months from now. I mean, imagine I didn't get this strike until the strike I received yesterday was for content that I'd published April 13th. And you can see that, by the way, if you want to go to Rokfin, you can actually watch that live stream from April 13th and then decide for yourself whether or not that warrants being removed from YouTube, that warrants being banned, being unable, being frozen and unable to participate. So that has, I released this video through my email newsletter. And then the next day I end up with a strike against my channel telling me that I'm not allowed to do anything because of medical misinformation. And they used a video. Their excuse was a video from back in April, a video that was no longer in public view. So it does all seem pretty sketchy. I was able to appeal it. And when I appealed it, I said, how is this possible that you're able to give me a strike for a video you already gave me a warning on and you removed it yourself? And the remainder of the video I had removed from public view. Explain that to me. And they, of course, couldn't. So they lifted the ban, the strike on the channel. So now I don't have a strike. If you get a second strike, you're not allowed to upload, live stream, or post for 2 weeks. And if you get a third strike, then you will be fully removed and deplatformed. So scary times that we're living in, when you just don't even know what is going to be deemed as medical misinformation, especially as the information continues to change. Right? From one day to the next, it just seems like new information is coming out, as it would, because science is always evolving. And we get this new information out there. We get, and minds are changing. We're seeing these Fauci emails that have come out, and there's really nothing surprising to me in those emails. The emails showed what really, if you'd been paying attention all along, had been said publicly, which was, at one point, maybe there was questions on whether or not certain things work. There were questions on whether or not things came from certain places. There was a lot of questioning going on back and forth. And now we have like written evidence of this, but we have video clip evidence of it as well. If you go back and you just watch old clips from CNN back in March, back in February, from April, if you just read guidelines from the WHO and reports that were put out by the WHO from a year, or two, even before the pandemic, a lot of that stuff isn't really new. Nothing really in my mind that was bombshell. It was just like, yeah, a lot of these people thought the same things that many in the public thought, but for whatever reason, when the public voiced their opinions on it, when the public said, hey, I think that, suddenly it was misinformation, fake news, you're an anti-vaxxer, you think the world is flat. That's how they've treated people. And they continue to. So I rewatched the video that gave me the strike on the channel. I rewatched it. And there was nothing in it that was medical misinformation. Not any of it was medical misinformation. Maybe they didn't like my opinion or my conclusion, but the information was very much the information that we all know now, that anyone can get. There was no misinformation whatsoever in that video. And again, if you want to watch it, it is still up and live on my Rokfin channel. Rokfin.com. It's ROKFIN, Rokfin.com/Kim is how you can watch that video. And that's from April 13th is the live stream on that. So I wasn't sure if I would be here today, on YouTube at least, because of the strike. And, this just kind of makes us all sit here and wonder, what can we do? What do we need to do moving forward? We're marching in a direction of being a one narrative nation. It is incredibly scary that is what's happening, that you just can't go against what the mainstream wants you to say or think at that time. And if they change, you're allowed to change, but you're not allowed to change unless they change, right? So that is where we're at. And you never know what that thing is. I mean, then someone says to me when I got the notification and that I was banned, some said, well, then just don't talk about COVID, right? Don't talk about, that that's going to get you in trouble, so don't talk about it. But the thing is that back in February 2nd or 3rd, when all of those channels were demonetized, when there was that kind of wave of demonetization going on with the progressive channels and some that weren't so progressive, but mostly were, that had nothing to do with the virus. That had nothing to do with the pandemic. That had to do with election. So we don't know what the thing is any given day or time that is going to be the thing we're not allowed to say or talk about. But it seems like increasingly it is just anything that's against MSNBC or CNN. That as long as you stay in line with them for the most part, I mean, you could deviate a little bit. You're allowed to be a bit anti-establishment, but not too much. You can't really go against the narrative. You have to stick with the narrative for the most part. And you're allowed to deviate slightly, but not really. When I first launched this channel, and it was only on YouTube at the time, whenever I would do a negative piece about Nancy Pelosi, and this was back in January, February of 2019, when I would do anything negative about Nancy Pelosi, it was demonetized. So it wasn't even about dangerous misinformation because of a pandemic, or you're spreading medical misinformation, or you're causing chaos that's going to lead to insurrection or anything like that. Even before any of that, it was still, you're not allowed to say what isn't sanctioned by CNN and MSNBC and the Democratic Party, or you're going to be punished in some way. Now, I wasn't removed from the platform. I didn't receive warnings or strikes, but to not be able to make money on certain videos is a way for them to discourage you from continuing to make those videos. They know that many of us, if we're going to do this job, this is a full-time job. It takes me hours and hours and hours a day to prepare for one live stream a night, 12 to 13 hours a day. I start early in the morning reading the news, researching, putting stuff together, answering email, a variety of things. My day starts, and this is a 12 to 13 hour day just to do a live stream at the end of that day. So it's a big job, and you can't just do it on the side really as a hobby if you want to do it well and if you want to have any sort of knowledge or do deep dive or research or anything like that. And they know this. They know that this is a hard job, that it is a job that takes a lot of time, and that the people that are going to do it, they need to make money off of it. Otherwise, they can't. And so what they do is they discourage you from talking about things they don't want you to talk about by demonetizing those videos. And that has been a huge hindrance for me over the last, how long have I been doing this now? 2.5 years, doing this show for 2.5 years. And the last year and a half in particular, they have done, really the last year, I would say, the last year, they have done their darndest to limit my channel, limit my money making ability off the channel. I have been cut financially down to 1/3 of what I was making the first year of this channel being on YouTube, if not more than that. But it's about, I'm down to about 1/3. So they cut financially down, they just cut you up the knees trying to get you to stop doing whatever it is that they don't want you to do. And then, continually getting these strikes and warnings, and it kind of makes us all wonder, how long is this going to last? Are they going to kick all of us off the platform eventually? Are they going to sanitize? And I think they are. I think they're planning on sanitizing sanitizing YouTube and making it to where there's really no news. And the only news that they're allowing is news that is, or, people that at least stick somewhat in line. And you'll notice that all the progressives, right? Many of them, they had these progressive channels. They were anti-establishment. You saw them, TYT, Humanist Report, right? There was David Dole. There were all of these different channels, and they grew and grew and grew. And then the trick was for them to continue to grow was that they, from what I assess and what I could see, is that they had to go along with the establishment to a degree. They had to basically say, okay, well, maybe I'm anti-establishment, and maybe I don't like Nancy Pelosi so much, or maybe I don't like the Democratic Party, but it's better than the Republican Party, so we have to champion it because it's better than the devil. And as long as you did that, because at least you were then ushering in the votes, at least you were still ushering in the sheep, right? towards that one same goal, you're allowed. So you're just not allowed to deviate too much. And if you do, if you're too disruptive, then it does seem like they do whatever they can to limit us. So scary, you know, of course, waking up to that notice was extremely scary. And I was just like, wow, you know, how am I going to continue on like this with this platform? This is really challenging. Obviously, I'm trying to launch a second show that is going to be less political. And that should hopefully, you know, just kind of that second thing. Oh, excuse me, I had to sneeze. So anyway, that is what's going on. That is, you know, it's frightening. And please sign up for my email newsletter. The only way that I think that, you know, there are other platforms out there, and I am on those other platforms. I'm on Rokfin. I have a locals community where you can watch all my stuff as well. I do have, you know, there's other ways to get the content. It kind of sucks, though, that that's the direction we have to go in, because that isn't, you know, it's easy for people to just log into one big platform like YouTube. The interface is really nice. You can cast it to your, you know, you can watch the app on your TV, so you don't even have to watch it on your computer or on your phone. You know, there's a lot of benefit to that. And they know that they have the benefit. Google knows that it creates amazing products. And they know that the alternatives aren't as polished, and people won't go to those other alternatives as much. I think that there will be other alternatives that grow and become bigger, and more people flock to them and whatnot. But to get that big, wide-reaching audience, YouTube is where that is really at the moment. And you know, I can't really grow my audience on the other platforms as easily. YouTube brings in traffic, but not when they limit the show, not when they limit the channel. So it's all very, very frustrating. I will ask you to please, the way forward from here is to sign up for my email newsletter. Just be sure that you're signed up for that. That way, you know, if just crap hits the fan and I somehow I disappear, at least you know where to get the content, where to continue. The show will go on. It's just, it might, where is the big question. Also, if you would like to help support the channel in more than just signing up for the email newsletter, but you want to support the channel and support the independent media, you can join my locals community. It's $5 a month. There you get vlogs plus all of the censored content that I put out there. Plus, I'm going to be I'm going to be uploading more and more of the actual content there as well. So that could be like your one-stop shop to get all of the content rather than just here for some and there for others and whatnot. So we're kind of still working on that, and they're working on their interface to make it smoother. But that is a great way, at least, to support the show, support my efforts, support what we're doing here, and independent media. All right. So for tonight, I really just wanted to kind of, I was watching yesterday, I very boring watching Congress, some congressional speeches. And there's this one in particular I stumbled on, and I just kind of had it on in the background. And this speech went on for a solid hour. It's two Republicans. These are, who is this? Chip from, he's a rep in Texas. Let me see. Chip Roy, I believe. Yeah, let me just double check the names here. Chip Roy. Yes. And the other one is, I want to say Scott Perry in Pennsylvania. Yes. Okay. Very boring stuff, right? So these two guys are standing in front of Congress. And I really want to point this out and show you some clips from this, because they're talking about America first, America first, America first. And a lot of people on the right are very much about America first. And that's great. But they have this incredible blind spot. And yes, I'm going to bring it up again, because I was floored when I was watching this speech. They have an incredible blind spot when it comes to Israel. Suddenly, Israel and supporting Israel, a foreign country, is somehow America first. And this is kind of the idea that we're getting with a lot of the conservatives, is that they want pro-American things. They want America first politics. They think liberals waste money. But then suddenly everything shifts when it comes to the conversation about Israel. Suddenly, Israel is like the 51st state we didn't know we had, and we have to do everything that we can to support Israel and defend Israel and give money to Israel, and that is just our obligation because they're Americans. I'm not really sure exactly what the thinking is on that. And I just want to bring this up because I saw in these clips. I also want to bring up before we watch these clips, I do want to say that, there has been an alarming rise in hate crimes against Asians and Jews in America. And although the number is still very, very small, and my mom, my grandma, my aunts, talking to them about everything, no one is feeling threatened. Really, it's just not enough. There's millions of people, and these are very few and far between. And when they happen, they make the news. They become very sensationalized, and everybody thinks that it's a way bigger problem than it actually is. It's not really a big problem, but it is a growing problem, right? It is something that, from a hate crime that would maybe go against Asians, for example, like 6 in a year, is now 26 in a year, but it's still relatively extremely low. So I want to keep that into perspective, is that it's very, very low. It's not an actual legitimate concern that many Asians are feeling in their daily lives. And I would imagine Jews are also not feeling this in their daily life. They're not afraid to walk out their front door thinking they're going to be a victim of a hate crime that day. However, there is a trend where we're seeing more of it, or at least we're seeing more of it in the news. And it is important, I think, for people to understand and remember that being, obviously, right, and you can connect this dot, obviously, somebody who is Chinese in America, one of the defenses that people have is they say, yeah, but, stop calling it the China flu, right? Don't call it the Chinese flu, because when you do that, you're putting Chinese people at risk, and they have nothing to do with the Chinese flu. And you don't look at Chinese people and think they have something to do with what's going on with the Uyghurs, right, in China. You don't look at them and say, well, you're to blame for the whatever's happening with a person on the street, and think, oh, you're responsible for the the abuse of the Uyghurs. Or you wouldn't look at them and say you're responsible for the virus that came from China or whatever. Some people are, and that's the problem, right? And so then the news says, oh, this is horrific. This can't happen. This is terrible. And many liberals in particular, progressives, come out and say, this is terrible. You can't go and blame Chinese people for this virus, and this is causing a rise in hate crimes. And so that same blind spot that I notice conservatives have when it comes to the state of Israel, right? They're all like, America first, Israel, Israel. There is also a similar blind spot when it comes to progressives and people on the left, where they say, where they have this connection with, you can't blame Chinese for all these things, but suddenly it's okay to blame Jews for what goes on in Israel against the Palestinians. Or they'll remain somewhat silent about crimes that are happening against American Jews, and because, well, but the Palestinians. And that is also not okay. And there are, what we have to do is remember that being Jewish is not the same thing as being a Zionist, or even being Israeli doesn't even mean you're a Zionist, or Jewish for that matter. There are non-Jew Israelis. There are, so we have to remember to kind of separate this thing. So as much as you wouldn't blame Chinese people for things that go on in China, you shouldn't be blaming American Jews for things that go on in Israel. If you find out that they're, supporting and they're sending a bunch of money and they're all about it, then, that's one thing. It's on a case-by-case basis. But even then, you wouldn't commit a hate crime against them. That is wrong. You would have a discussion. You would try to change their mind, and that would be the end of it. So that being said, and now that we've said that, I do want to show you some of these clips. So these are, again, you've got Chip Roy and Scott Perry. They're for whatever reason, they're given an hour on the House floor to talk about this thing they wanted to talk about, which was America First. So here's the first clip. Listen to this one. This is kind of starts you off to get you to know what this is all about.
There are a number of issues that are facing the constituents that I represent, but I believe this is true for people all across the country. In Texas, I've spoken many times here on this floor about this. In Texas, our border is under siege. In Texas, it's a very real impact on our life, our communities. I share that with my colleagues from all across the country, all 50 states represented in here. It's very real in Texas, but it's very real in our country about what the impact's going on with the broken border. It's very real what's happening right now with people who run small businesses and need to hire people and they can't because we're paying people more not to work than to work. It's very real when people are going to buy gas at the pump and it's well over $3 a gallon. It's very real when they're trying to buy a house and lumber's up 470%. It's very real when they want to go get the health care of their choice and they can't. It's very real when they turn on the TV and they watch what was Middle East peace now turning into chaos as our friends in Israel are being attacked.
Okay, so, he's starting off and he's saying America First, right? These are the things, these are the issues that Americans are facing. You see he's setting up and he's got his America First sign in the back. And he's going to talk about, at length for 1 hour, he's going to stand up there and he's going to talk about America First policies and how we are failing with America First policies. So here is the second clip. And this one here, you've got Scott Perry's going to join in and he's going to also talk about America First. So here this is.
Of course, a great energy state, has been for a long time. Titusville, the Drake well, and so on and so forth. It goes back a long time for us. We can't get our natural gas to market in New England because we can't get a pipeline through. They won't allow it. So where does New England get its natural gas in the wintertime when times are tough? They buy it from Russia. Talk about a national security issue. Again, more insult to injury. None of this is based on an America First agenda. It's almost like everybody else is first other than America. And these are political leaders and policymakers elected by their American constituency. You would think that they would want to support that constituency first, do what's best for them, ease their concerns when they got to make the bills, pay the mortgage or the gas bill or pay for your child's education. And the prices just keep going up because of decisions that are made based on politics, not based on efficacy and what's good for people in America.
Okay. So he's going on and on about, again, America First, America First. Fair enough, right? So you've got Chip Roy from Texas. You have Scott Perry from Pennsylvania, and they're talking about things that, actually when I was listening to this, I'm thinking, yeah, okay, I agree. I actually do agree with an America First policy. I know that came from right-wing America, and people say, oh, that's just right-wing talk. But actually, I think all of us can agree that we want more America First policies, that we want to put the people in America first. And these guys go on and they're talking about things like gas prices and child care and home prices and jobs. And it's like, yeah, everybody in America needs these things. This is a good thing to be talking about. But then suddenly, at about 40 minutes, I'd say 30 minutes in to what ended up being a 1 hour conversation, 1 hour speech, at the 30-minute mark, the America First conversation takes a strange turn. And this is important for us to kind of pay attention to because these are our tax dollars. These are people in Congress talking, and they're in charge of our tax dollars, right? So they're at first arguing that our tax dollars need to go towards America First policies, that we need to be doing better for the American people. So this is why the conversation regarding Israel is so important. A lot of people say, what do I care? Why should I care about it? It's because we give so much money away to foreign countries, Israel being the number one beneficiary of American tax dollars. And we have a lot of problems in America, and yet we're still funneling off billions of dollars to a foreign country. So this one is a really long clip, so I'm not going to play all of it for you. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of skip ahead on it. I'm going to skip around. so you guys can, because it's like 11 minutes long, because they went on for 11 minutes about Israel. So I want to kind of show this to you guys, and we're going to kind of skip along, and I'm going to kind of talk over it a little bit. So here is this longer clip. Check this out.
I know the gentleman, probably has things he needs to do, but before he leaves, I wanted to address one other issue on national security, because I know he's got a passion for this as well. We've talked about the impact on our economy of America First versus America Last. We've talked about the impact on the border of America First versus America Last. We've talked about the impact on energy and availability of energy in America First versus America Last. Now let's talk a little bit about the impact on the stability in the world, on Middle East peace, on our national security, and the national security of our friends and allies, and in particular, our friends in Israel. I know the gentleman, like I, has traveled to Israel. I've been there a couple of times. I'm sure the gentleman's been there a few times. In my experience in Israel, it is an extraordinary place with extraordinary people, with a pluralistic culture, a multi-faith culture, but it is a burgeoning democracy, a strong economy, and probably our strongest ally in the world, if not in the world, certainly in the Middle East. And the previous administration was doing what, for decades, previous administrations had said was impossible, and was striking historic peace deals with Arab nations, working, interacting with Israel, with flights, direct flights from Arab nations to Israel occurring. The Abraham Accords. We had significant peace in the Middle East. And yet, what do we have today? In a few short months, under the wisdom of the current administration.
Okay, so let's just stop there for just a second. You can see how crazy this kind of is, right? You can kind of see right now that suddenly we went from this America First discussion about gas prices and education and home prices and border security, and suddenly now we're talking about Israel. And he goes on and he's saying, well, we've got these friends and they're a pluralistic country and a they've got all of these wonderful things going on. So he switches from talking about America, which made sense to me, to suddenly talking about all of the benefits of a foreign country. I think it's important to remember this. You have to take whatever feelings you have about the country of Israel, what it stands for, who it represents, all of that. If you're emotionally connected to that country, you got to do what you can to step away from it. This is a foreign country. And this is the only foreign country where Americans are allowed to have some sort of this affinity and loyalty for, that goes so over the top that people in Congress will dedicate a solid 20 minutes in an America First speech to a foreign country. I mean, think about that. Think about if Cuban American congressional leaders, and these guys aren't Jewish Americans, they're not Israeli Americans or anything of the sort. They're just conservative Christian Americans. But imagine if there was Cuban Americans, or imagine if like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Rashida Tlaib and all the members of the squad got up there and they did a speech for an hour long talking about America First, and then suddenly they shifted to Cuba and they started talking about how wonderful Castro is and how wonderful, and I know a lot of people are so offended, right, that I've now compared Israel to Cuba. No, you're only offended because you have an emotional affinity for one country and it may be a hatred for another. But so do other people. So you just remember, they're both foreign countries. It doesn't matter how you feel about them, actually. So if you sit there and you say, well, but I want a socialist or a communist country, and look at the benefits of this country over here and how wonderful it is, and we should be giving them more money, and we should be continuing to support them because of how wonderful their government is and how wonderful they are, that would be odd. And not only would it be odd, but conservatives would be outraged, full on outraged by that. Yet here we are, and it is completely normal for some reason, totally and completely normal, to be talking about a foreign country, the country of Israel. So I want to continue playing more of this clip. Let's see if I can skip ahead here for you guys.
I'm sure he's experienced what I experienced when I was at the Sea of Galilee, and I was on the floor the other night with Brian Mast, our fellow veteran, your fellow veteran, I should say. who lost his legs in service to our country. He also served 2 years in the Israeli Defense Forces. Well, Brian and I were both sharing the story about when we were sitting on a pier at the Sea of Galilee, and the Israelis who were on that pier stood up and looked at us, and they all sang "God Bless America," and they all stood up and thanked us one by one for what we do in defense of Israel and our partnership with them. And this administration is walking away from that. This administration is hugging Iran. This administration wants to cut deals with Iran, provide resources to Hamas in the Gaza Strip, which undermines Israel and undermines our national security. And the American people, when they know this, they don't want it.
I will close with.
Okay, so I just want to pause that for just a second there. So, again, you know, he's going on, and he's talking about a foreign country and a foreign country's problems, and then brings up Hamas. And somehow there is this notion that we need to be, you know, and I have no problems with Israel being an ally. You know, we have a bunch of other allies around the world. I mean, that's pretty normal to have. So whatever. But it's another thing to say this affects our national security if we are no longer supporting Israel and their issues with Hamas. If we don't do that, then it's an issue with our national security. Somebody explain that. How is it getting involved in another country's problems an issue that affects our national security? Because actually it's the opposite. Getting involved in the Middle East is causing us problems with our national security. The reason we were attacked on 9/11, the reason why we're attacked with various different, maybe a jihadist sort of terrorist attack, when these rare things occur, but they happen here in the United States, or when they're occurring against American soldiers in the Middle East, it is not because they just want to attack us. It is because we have inserted ourselves into their land, and they're wanting us to leave. They're wanting us to go away. They're saying, get out of here. You don't belong here. It's not your part of the world. So it would be very, very similar to, imagine if ISIS or Al-Qaeda were able to secure the Mexican border and they were there, we would be doing whatever we could to get them out of there. Even though they're in a foreign country, they're not crossing into America's borders just yet. Or maybe they would. Even if they came into America, we would be doing everything we could to get them out. And then could you imagine if their government said, look at all these terrorist Americans, like we're just over there trying to defend ourselves. You know, could you imagine, just for 2 seconds, Iran coming in and setting up bases inside of the United States and saying that they just are doing it to defend themselves. And then when we attack their bases, they say, oh my gosh, look at these terrorists. These Americans are terrorists. We can't leave. They keep attacking us. All we're trying to do is defend ourselves. They keep attacking us. And so it's insanity, right? Actually, our national security, we are less secure because we're less secure because we're over there. So they're going on and on about this. And I want to continue playing a little bit more of this clip because this is just, to me, you know, it's pretty loony. So let's go ahead and play some more.
I'm sure the gentleman has much more he'd like to talk about, and I've kind of interrupted him here a little bit, but I've so appreciated his work. Our relationship with Israel is much closer than just friendship. We depend on one another in so many ways that are unseen and unknown. And just one thing that had crossed my mind on many occasions, when you fly the most lethal attack helicopter in the world, the AH-64 Apache.
Do you know something about that?
You have a helmet system that is linked to the camera system, linked to the gun, that the placement of your head is followed by those cameras so you can fly the aircraft, is followed by that weapon system so that you can defend yourself at a moment's notice at all times. And that following that's done with that helmet, which is very expensive, is made by our friends in Israel.
I'm just going to skip ahead a little bit so you guys can kind of see how this goes.
Hamas and what's happening, what they're doing, sending these munitions over. It's an insult. Arabs in Israel are the freest Arabs in that part of the world, right? They serve in government. They have their own political parties. They have their own free speech in Israel. It's an insult.
All ahead. Give them notice. Tell them the missiles are coming in. They say, vacate the block, because in 15 minutes, that building's going to be gone. And then we heard our colleagues on the other side of the aisle lamenting that somehow AP or Al Jazeera were in a building that was taken out. Yet there's ample evidence that they knew full well that Hamas was operating in that building, and they knew it, and yet they were doing it anyway, and they didn't care.
Is the gentleman from Texas aware that Hamas routinely locates their firing batteries, their munition stocks in schools, in populated areas with
The same way that we would if 1,500, or actually, we're up to 3,300 rockets have been launched by Hamas in the last 8 days. Can you imagine what the American people would be saying and doing if I was sitting
under attack from a foreign nation? So absolutely, Israel has the right to defend itself and to respond to attacks. And again, it is abhorrent. It is completely insulting to refer to it as they do, and to take the side of the aggressor in this regard and say that, well, the response is disproportionate. What is the proportionate response when your innocent family is killed under the barrage of an unwarranted, unprovoked missile attack from across the close border? What is the appropriate response if it were your family?
Okay, so you guys, I mean, they went on and on and on and on and on in an America First speech about Israel. Do you not see how insane that is? That this would be what they do, saying, okay, it's America First, America First, America First, Israel. And in fact, just to summarize this speech on the House floor about America First, to summarize it and how absolutely insane it really was, I want you to watch this final clip because this really summarizes what happened during this speech.
The gentleman joining me, I know he agrees with me that an America First agenda that is pro-jobs, pro-affordable prices, pro-border security, pro-Israel, pro-national security, pro-abundant energy. I appreciate the gentleman joining me. I know he agrees with me that an America First agenda that is pro-jobs.
Did you see this? Sorry. So he goes, we got to be America First, right? We've got to, in order to be America First, we have to be pro-job, pro-border security, pro-Israel, guys, this is a foreign country. This is a foreign country. And they're mixing it in with this America First conversation. And he's saying being America First is being pro-jobs, pro-border security, pro-Israel. Think about that. America First is pro-jobs, pro-border security, pro-Israel, a foreign country. This is the insanity that we're hearing over and over coming from right-wing America on this one, where, the whole speech made so much sense as these two congressional leaders were talking about oil supply, high prices of gas, high cost of even childcare and homes, and the jobs issues and all of these things they were talking about. And they were pretty much on track. Maybe I disagreed with them a little here or there on some of their solutions or whatnot, but sticking with an America First agenda, and it made a lot of sense to me until suddenly the conversation switched to Israel. And it was, in order to be America First, you have to be pro-Israel. And that just doesn't make any actual logical sense. Now, can Israel be an ally of ours like Germany, like the UK? Sure, fine. But nowhere in these speeches does anyone say being America First is being Germany first, and going on and talking about the Germans and how wonderful they are and how we need to be sending our money to Germany because that is what's best for America, or that we need to be sending our money off to the UK because that's what's best for America. We don't actually think that. It never gets said. There is no group of lobbyists that are lobbying on behalf of Germany saying, well, the United States needs to start funneling a ton of money to that country in order for them to remain stable because, well, that would be America First, after all, to have your tax dollars going to this foreign country. It's absurd. It's insane. And this speech really showcased exactly the insanity that we're dealing with. And even if people don't want to get involved in the conflict regarding the Palestinians and the Israelis and what is happening over there, the one thing you should care about is the fact that congressional leaders stand on the House floor for an hour talking about America First policies, and about a quarter of it was spent on Israel First policies. And they're arguing this because they want our tax dollars to continue going over there. So that is the big problem that we have. If you don't care about the conflict, fair enough. There's plenty of conflicts around the world you probably don't care about. I'm not asking you to care about some other conflict in some other area of the world. I don't think it's your problem. But it is your problem when it's our tax dollars going towards it. right? That then becomes our problem when we say, hey, we got enough problems on our own soil. We don't need to be giving our money away. But this is it is very similar to like a brainwashing that has happened in our congressional leaders, that they must take this stance. And if they don't, and even in the media, they must take this stance. And if they don't, their careers will never advance. My career will never advance. I actually had a gentleman from Israel, and he was emailing me, and he actually accused me for financial and career gain of taking a pro-Palestinian viewpoint. And I nearly choked on my tea as I was reading this. It's done the exact opposite for me, the exact opposite. If I wanted to have a big career in media, if I wanted to make a lot of money and make a lot of friends, I would take the stance that obviously anybody who's climbing a corporate ladder takes. And it's the only stance you can. And so this brainwashing is something that, we need to, the shifting is happening. Us as a society, we're shifting, and we're realizing this is kind of insane that we're so pro this foreign country to the level where it's blinding. We're allowing, even if it's just not even about the human rights abuses, and saying, well, foreign countries will deal with themselves the way they deal with them. China's China, they do what they do. Iran is Iran, they do what they do. Israel is Israel, they do what they do. There's plenty of places in the world, they're just going to do what they do, and it's really kind of none of our business. Fine, I am totally fine with that. It doesn't need to be our business, but unfortunately it is, because our tax dollars are going to it, and we've got enough problems on America's soil because, America first. So I just wanted to show this to you. Very interesting clips. Interesting what's going on in our congressional leaders. It's interesting that they're not as focused on us as they should be, and instead they're focused on sending our tax dollars away. So, all right, guys, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I appreciate you guys being here. Thanks for sticking around with me through these challenging times of these one narrative nations that we're facing. And we are kind of shifting around with some technology over here. So we're doing it's a little bit of a learning curve. Appreciate you guys being patient with that. If you would like to support this show, you can by going to my locals community. And there you can get behind the scenes. I share some of the updates that I'm doing to the studio. Also do kind of a vlog talking about a variety of news subjects that happen throughout the day. And also, not only that, but also on locals, I also do, there it is for you guys. You can email me, kim@kimiverson.com. You can go to my locals channel, and there you can go and sign up for $5 a month, and you get behind the scenes, plus you get censored content, plus you get a whole host of other things, and you can support this show. So please go there. Please be sure also to sign up for my email newsletter. My newsletter, you can get the scoop on what is happening, when I get censored, banned, striked, that kind of stuff. You guys can check that out through the email newsletter. And that's a way for me to communicate to you. And it's also where you can receive the latest video that you cannot receive because I did not upload it on any of the platforms. So you can go and get that segment. It's about a 45-minute segment. You definitely want to watch it. Sign up for my email newsletter, and it will automatically show up in your inbox. You can sign up by going to KimIversonUncensored.com.